Okay, so it'd be great to start with a little bit of background on the company AVK, or is to give it its full name, is it AVK-SEG? But yeah, explain a bit about what the company is, what it does.
Yeah, so AVK are the largest and fastest growing critical power solutions provider within UK and Europe. So previously, we've sort of started our growth 35 years ago as a dynamic UPS provider. And we've seen sort of through time, stepping through various technologies where we've gone through static UPSs, diesel generators, now HVO generators, gas generation and battery storage. And I suppose that over the last 3 years, really focusing on that power solutions piece, we've just gone through a fairly big rebrand that kind of describes exactly who we are now. So we're delivering just shy of 1 gigawatt of power per year for either standby application or prime application. So standby typically reciprocating generators running on HVO, and then more recently the power plant designs that are microgrids that are running data centers completely off grid. So where we see sort of grid constrained data centers, we're actually building them their own private wired connection to kind of jump over, I suppose, the national grid infrastructure where they're seeing constraints of up to sort of 10, 15 years. So, yeah.
Okay, before we drill down a little bit more into that, I'd just be nice to acknowledge that you are featured in the, is it Phoebe, or which is what, for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs growth 100 list. So I'd just be good to sort of understand how you got that sort of feather in your cap, if you like.
Yeah, so it was great when they reached out, actually. So it's an award that takes into account the UK companies' growth over a year period, and I think we were somewhere in the 50s, but yeah, achieved sort of growth off the back of the data center market that the market's really seen, I suppose, over the last sort of 2-3 years. It was great to be recognised, great for the business to be recognised for all its sort of hard work in delivering and going through growth, as everyone knows, is quite difficult. It's great, but also it takes a lot of individuals in the business to really help steady that growth and recognise the growth as well. So it was a really positive message for us, both internally and externally, to be noted by that award.
And in terms of the company's focus, as I think you've already explained to a certain extent, it's if we like summarize as sustainable power solutions, if that's right. And I guess a part of that would be around renewables and decarbonisation. So just, yeah, if you can sort of expand a little bit on that focus, if that indeed is right.
Yeah, so I think sort of the data center market at the moment, obviously there's a huge focus and there's two sort of areas that are working against each other in some aspects. You've got huge requirements for energy, but a huge requirement to be more sustainable. And I think what we're trying to do at AVK is kind of lay a path and show the journey of how to get to net zero realistically. So we look at the amount of energy that data centers are actually using by taking an alternative view in, say we build a microgrid for a data center, although that is going to run on gas in first instance, the future proofing of that it can run on biomass, it can run on biogas, it can run on hydrogen, allows us to keep up with societal's demand now for data, but try and future proof for the sustainability area as well. Because I think there's a big educational piece around sustainability in DCs, that it's not just renewables that are the answer, and that's one of the big parts that we're trying to sort of step through with clients, that just having a load of wind or solar is actually, it's really important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. You still need those flexible assets that when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, that you can depend on. And if we look at sort of Europe at the moment, you've still got coal and oil being burnt in those times of low renewable areas. So by us building these microgrids that run on gas, you're introducing hundreds of megawatts into a grid network, if we can get a grid connection eventually, that instead of burning that coal and oil at times of low renewables, you're actually going to burn gas, which is significantly better on carbon. So you start to attack the top of the energy stack instead of everyone focusing on the renewables, which is, for me, a real focus. But I think ABK are answering the question that no one really talks about too much, and trying, as I said, to show that sort of path to how we get to a net zero energy stack, and understanding that it is a journey, I suppose.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, there's a significant need to build out a sustainable digital infrastructure, and I guess that includes developing grid capacity. We haven't mentioned the AI word yet, but that's clearly putting sort of additional pressure on what's already a power hungry sector. So just, I suppose, your thoughts as to how grid capacity can be increased to help meet, and also obviously in a sustainable way, but to meet the existing, let alone potentially future demands when AI really comes on stream.
Yeah, so I suppose grid capacity is sort of the big question on everyone's lips, isn't it? Everywhere you go, everyone talks about power, and I think what we've sort of fell victim of, I suppose, is that no one really truly could have predicted the growth in data centers, let alone what AI brings. And I think the way sort of national infrastructures work with sort of increasing infrastructure for grid connectivity, it's a fairly long process, and the timelines don't necessarily match speed for data centers to get to market, and ability to upgrade local substations or grid infrastructure. So I suppose our question that we're answering is, well, we will build those microgrids that actually is going to take pressure off of that grid infrastructure and give the local grid probably a bit more time to actually gain a bit more of a strategy around their deployment for those enabling works. We see DNOs and local authorities that have never seen sort of the request of 100 megawatt grid connection, let alone sort of 6 or 7. And it's a bit of a head scratcher for one person to solve. If we look at the UK, for example, for National Grid to just go and solve that, I think is a really big task. And it's something that I believe, with applying a different way of thinking for data centers and how energy is viewed, actually allows us to alleviate some of those pressures to get quicker speed to market, but also allows us to look at that sustainability piece around, all right, we're actually going to be masters of our own destiny on how our energy is produced. And you start to look at future-proofing with the technology that's available now to use future fuels, and understanding that technology's fuel roadmap. But then also you start to look at what that energy center can do for your local community. You've got heat, you've got carbon, and we're already having some really interesting conversations with clients around how do we best utilize that and become sort of good data center citizens, I suppose.
Yeah, and in terms of the data center capacity, which you alluded to, I think, a couple of times, clearly that's increasing significantly. The downside seems to be at the moment, particularly with AI. I mean, I think it's no secret, was Google a couple of months ago revealed kind of casually that from 2019 to now, they've almost 50% increase of their carbon footprint, which doesn't sound desperately good, bearing in mind we're all trying to, and I'm sure they're not alone. But just, I suppose, your thoughts as to how we can, and I think you've explained a little bit, but just how important it is to develop sustainable data center capacity to help cope with this AI growth, which, as I say, I mean, it's already significant, but if the predictions are true, it's going to sort of go off the scale in a few years' time.
Yes, so I think it's probably one of the most important pieces of the data center market at the moment that we're faced with, the challenge that we're faced with as a market. You know, if we look at traditionally how data centers have been built, they've been built the same for the last 35 years, you know, with no real, all right, we've been really focused on PUE and other areas, but the sustainability piece hasn't really been at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I think as we see sort of AI and just data centers in general become more consumer focused to the person on the street, I think it's so important for us to be able to show that we're making educated decisions. And again, I think it's also educating the market in the fact that there is, unfortunately, I don't believe there is a silver bullet that just goes, we are completely sustainable and we are net zero. There may be in some areas within Europe where they have really great access to renewables, but in the round, especially in Europe, that's quite a difficult piece to sort of unpack. But it's that fine balance that we have to sort of step through in the societal's need for data, but also the consciousness around sustainability. And again, it comes back to us working with technology that we have that's available now, that when R&D around fuel and those roadmaps for sustainable fuels or integration with renewables around control systems, and that we're designing with that in mind. Because I think that's what we're presented with at the moment. You know, the reality is we have to put in technology that we know is robust and works and is proven. And there's loads of great technology R&D aspects that are sort of catching up, and they will be the future, you know, that for sure. But it's really hard for us to put a pin in it and say our fuel cells will definitely be the future, because we're not at that point in that journey yet. So it comes back to this road to net zero being this journey of, we are here now, we understand societal's need for data, we understand that we need to be more sustainable. How do we put that into best practice? And it comes back to, as I said, you know, designing any power system, be it prime or standby, with the future in mind, but truly being able to show that, you know. And part of our relationship, we have a relationship with Rolls-Royce, very strong relationship with them. We make up over 60% of their European capacity for reciprocating engines, and we're already having that thought and discussion with them around the use of SAF fuels. You know, they're heavily embedded into the aviation industry. So learning from other industries that are very well, they're under the same spotlight. You know, aviation, marine, and data centers are all kind of grouped in a similar spotlight now, who are using large amount of the world's energy or fuels. And how do we solve that? And I think sharing that knowledge across those industries is really important. And that's something that we're driving with our partners. Like I mentioned, Rolls-Royce in aviation. We also have Wärtsilä in the marine business. You know, again, sort of cruise ships inherently sort of under a lot of pressure for sustainability. And it's taking it down to the manufacturer to really understand how best we can deploy the product that we've got that is tried and tested, but how does that relate to the great work that companies are doing around sustainable fuels, and how do we sort of kickstart that into, right, let's make that the new norm. And we've seen really great success with sort of fuels like HVO come online, you know, that we've deployed over 5 million litres, and that's sort of the first step to, well, it's the first step, but also shows that it's absolutely possible. You know, it shows the art of the possible if everyone sort of puts their mind to it and everyone truly cares.
And it sounds as if the strategy is for these energy intensive industries to kind of, I won't say go it alone, but to do their own sort of, or develop their own solutions. And then, if I understood you correctly, at some stage, if you like, when government, let's be honest, you know, kind of catches up, then what's been going on within these infrastructures can kind of link into what the plan is for the sort of national power infrastructure. Is that right, to sort of join up at some stage in the future?
Yeah, so if we look at a site that we're deploying at the moment, that site won't get grid connection for maybe 4 or 5 years. So that developer cannot build on that site, which can't meet the demand for data um, until the 5 year window, until they start getting grid, and that keeps moving back and back. So what we've done is we've built that microgrid that's allowed them to deploy and build their data center faster than they previously could. And then the next step is when we get that grid connection, how do we make that microgrid something that can actually give back and become part of that national infrastructure? So it takes financial burden off of the national grid, because it's already built, it's already wrapped up, it already has a business case to be built, but there is power that isn't necessarily being used all of the time, albeit maybe not the full capacity, but there is that spare headroom, the +1 engine or whatever it looks like. You can start to deploy power, which obviously it's dependent on location because it's fault levels, what we can plug into, and that needs to be mapped out. But just by the sort of trailblazing developers that are sort of taking that bold step to take power into their own hands, I suppose, that next conversation of how they can contribute is a really key part of how the data center market is viewed, and how it's sort of the solution to the energy sort of, I don't want to say crisis, but energy issues.
And you may not want to ask this one, but I mean, how much of a hindrance, I suppose is the right word, do you think government, whether it's UK or just more generally, because they don't quite understand what's going on, or put it the other way, how much easier would it be for this whole problem to be addressed if governments were fully sort of understanding and in tune with the need to develop this infrastructure at pace, if you like, as opposed to, as you say, waiting for endless planning decisions, or just getting round to getting the capacity to be built and allowed onto the grid system?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we sort of look for government for legislation, but I think it's on us as sort of the educated industry to really try and educate those people to make good decisions, and make the right decisions. I think that it's not lost on anyone the importance of data and the growth for each country for being involved in the AI sort of era. I suppose it's the step through has to be sort of sitting down and understanding exactly what the pain points are and what the real concerns are. We've seen that on a small scale with sort of the emissions authorities around standby, with sort of emissions for standby generation, sitting with them and sort of advising, helping shape that sort of legislation has been part of the success in quick deployment and planning around areas that have grid and they're just a traditional build data center, but they have a high concentration of standby generation, bringing the EA on and having really good workshops and just sort of showing how engine technology works, has really helped that. So I think the governmental piece is as much on the government to sort of understand the importance and how being a bit quicker may help, but also it sits back on the industry really for me to try and educate and bring everyone on the journey, because I think it's not just the developer that can help educate. It's not just the grid. It's not National Grid. It's not the government. It's not people like us, the solutions provider. It takes all of us to sort of understand, because we all have our own little niche expertise, right? Ours is power and the overall solution. But local planning, how that implements, there's going to be other experts there. So I think it's a whole piece of the industry that needs to just sort of step through it in the right way. I think it's more the right way than speed for me.
And in terms of, I think what you mentioned at the top, it's digital and sustainable, digital or sustainable. I mean, are you confident that the two can coexist with sort of, if you like, equal equal balance, or do you think inevitably you either have to slightly sort of squeeze the data center and other, energy intensive industries to try and become more sustainable, or not turn a blind eye to sustainability, but accept that you might never quite get to net zero if you want to have this, digitally enabled world that we're all benefiting from?
I like to hope so that the two go hand in hand. I think there's a long road to go around that technology piece. I don't think the technology's there at the moment, but there's already great areas of progress. But I think again it comes back to being really honest around how we report on that sustainability, owning as an industry what we're doing. Say, for example, lithium-ion batteries. The big question: are they great for the environment? Probably not in their embodied carbon. So there's a load of questions that we have to unpack to sort of answer that. But I'm positive that the industry gets there. I think the journey for me is quite straightforward. If we look at sort of peak lopping plants within the UK, so probably five years ago, there was a load of deployment of gas generation in the UK that in times of peak demand, these gas generators start. And if you actually look at the energy stack in the UK, there's not that much coal and oil left, in comparison to somewhere like Europe. So we've seen it on a smaller scale already in how that first step can be made. So I believe Europe taking that next step, and data centers is probably the only industry that can do that on such a fast track scale, just because of the sheer size of the power that's being deployed. So again, it's taking that first step, and then it's waiting for sort of all of the stars to align, whether it's fuel, whether it's technology, whether it's funding, whether it's location. There's all these lines that are intersecting, and these sort of dots that are slowly getting closer and closer together. And that sort of, when they all collide, is that exact point where data and sustainability go hand in hand. And I truly believe that we get there. But I think it's an industry-wide thought that needs to lead it. It's not just sort of one company. Like AVK truly believe in it as a business, but it's not lost on us the importance of other areas like fuel companies, whether it's HVO, whether it's hydrogen. It's impossible for just one company just to step through it. So I think it's a mind shift for the market.
And just, I suppose, a wider societal question to finish, maybe. I mean, do you also think at some stage there will inevitably have to be the sort of question as to whether all this digital consumption is necessary, desirable? I know people have talked about things like, giving individuals a sort of carbon allowance per annum so they can decide whether they want to fly away on holiday, or, you store 10,000 photos on the, in a cloud and all that. Do you think we'll ever get to that? Or do you think, as we've been discussing, the industries that are required will come up with the sort of required solutions that mean we can carry on consuming more or less as we wish digitally?
I really hope we don't get to that. I think, and I think again, data, if we look at data requirement, I've seen a couple of pieces written around how if people didn't store memes, then data centers wouldn't be growing as much. And I feel that's a really dangerous narrative, if we look at the great things that data does, sort of medical, even in business, there's so many different applications for data. It's so broad that I feel that we've sort of started along this societal need for data, and the exam question to the industry and for companies like us is, how do we do this sustainably, and how do we stop it getting to a consumer problem? And I think that's something that we should own. I really do believe that. I think we should own that as an industry. We've got seriously intelligent people within this industry, and as it sort of grows focus, and if you look at, there's not many other industries where we're experiencing this sort of growth. So the amount of investment that's coming in, I would really hope that we don't get to a point where we start making it the consumer's problem. You know, I would like to think that we could hopefully solve it, and I believe we could solve it.
Okay, it's been fascinating to chat, and some great insights into, if you like, some innovation around power sort of issues within the industry sector. It's been great to have your time, Sir Ben. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Philip.